Good afternoon, collectors and friends. Thank you so much for joining me today on Trading Card Therapy, episode number 79. I'm your host, Leighton Sheldon, the doctor, owner of Just Collect, co-owner of VintageBreaks.com. We have a great guest today, someone who is very well known in our Vintage Breaks community, and we're going to bring on Jim in just a few minutes. So let's get right down to it. I have a few things to cover before we bring on Jim. First is I'll be going out to Arizona, specifically the Scottsdale and Phoenix areas next week from October 9th through the 14th. And I do have a few appointments already lined up. I have a little bit of time available for a few more appointments. So if you'd like to set something up with me and potentially have something appraised and or have an offer on some cards or your entire card collection, you can reach out to me directly, Leighton at justcollect.com. That's Leighton at justcollect.com. If Instagram is your thing, you can message me on there. My Instagram handle is Leighton_Sheldon. And of course, wherever you enjoy your favorite podcasts, like Spotify or Apple and platforms like that, you can listen to this week's episode, number 79 of Trading Card Therapy. But next week's episode will be off for now because I'll be traveling. So number 80 will be coming out the following week. We usually drop on Fridays at about 3 p.m. Eastern time on those platforms I just mentioned and the Just Collect YouTube channel. So if you have something in Arizona, please feel free to reach out. If you're just interested in reaching out, and meeting up with Charles from Vintage Breaks West fame and some other people I'll be hanging out with, drop me a line. Would love to grab a drink, some apps, and talk cards. I recently went to the Philly card show. We talked about that extensively on here. One of the things I didn't talk about was a particular autograph that I saw for sale at the show. And it was on my list of things to research a little bit further. And admittedly, I'm not an autograph expert. I'm a vintage card expert, and autographs, I have bought and sold them, but I also like to collect them. And this particular autograph was slabbed. The asking price was $2,000. So we're going to show you what I'm talking about in just a minute. And the reason why I was hesitant is because this person's still alive. And so to me, and I'm curious what you guys think before I even name anyone, but even Michael Jordan, right? You know, Michael Jordan autographs, I mean, to be fair, he's the most expensive, I believe, living person. But, you know, that's a lot of money, a few $1,000s for an autograph of a living individual from someone that's famous from sports. In fact, there's not too many that come to mind that would be alive and worth $2,000 or more, probably other than Michael Jordan. And so that's why in this particular case, I took some time to not only try to do some research, but really figure out, like, is this something that I wanted? And so I just wanted to show you what happens through the love of collecting. This particular item, although I thought it was really cool, upon further research, I discovered truly how I thought amazing it actually is. And so without further ado, I'm going to show you this particular autograph that I first found at the Philly show a few weeks ago, and I'm going to tell you about my journey. So this is a Sandy Koufax signed government postcard, autograph grade of 9 by PSA. And at first glance, it may not appear to be anything special, but if you flip it over, now realize I have no relation to Donald Seidel. I don't believe the person I bought it from does either. It is a fellow dealer, as they did have this for sale. But if you look a little bit more closely, look at the postmark. This is postmarked September 6th, 1955, right out of New York, New York. Now, why is that relevant? Because just 10 days before that, Koufax had his first ever complete game win. Not just complete game, he had a win. He threw a shutout. And I think I have all the stats right here. He had 5 walks surrendered. He had 14 Ks. So can you imagine in the days of old that there was no ESPN, right? There was no Instagram story going viral. There was no YouTube. But somehow this lefty, now he had been in the majors for a very brief stint before that. He had started one game. I think he went about 4 innings. But 10 days before this, on August 27th, he pitched his first ever complete game shutout for his first ever major league victory. So is this not insane that this was mailed, I would imagine, at some point after that? It's possible it was before, but Koufax all of a sudden finds stardom, and then this gets mailed back to Donald. And by the way, Koufax actually had one more start on September 3rd, which is insane. He threw another complete game shutout. So by the time Donald gets this back on September 6th, Sandy Koufax, as a young rookie in the majors for the Brooklyn Dodgers, is 2-0 with 2 complete game shutouts. And it looks like 20 strikeouts in 2 games. It's kind of wild. 7 hits in those 2 games surrendered. So I just wanted to share with you very briefly my journey in discovering this, because when I first found it, it's like, oh, this is super cool. Then I saw the price tag. I'm thinking it should have been $500, $750. And really, because I'm not an autograph guy, excuse me, I thought maybe it was a little high. And to be fair, my dealer friend didn't sell it. So I reached out to him after the convention, after doing my research, and also reached out to a buddy of mine. It turns out he didn't sell it. So I asked him if he had any flexibility, and he said the best that he could do was $1,600. I decided to go for it, and it just arrived earlier today. So this is why I wanted to share it with you all. And I'm curious, have any of you ever experienced something like this, where you've been to a convention, and let's just say you are a card collector in this case. So whether it be it's a piece of memorabilia, whether it be it's an autograph, it's a movie poster, it's a rock and roll item, has there been something that really just caught your eye, and you then did research afterwards? You went back to buy it, but in this case, even though he had it, the item was then gone. So I'd love to hear either way. Some stories of success, or some heartbreaking stories where you thought you wanted to buy it, would have been a good or a fair deal, and then you went back to that person or that company, and it was sold. Because I really was going to bet that this thing was sold. I was shocked it was still available after doing the research. And I'm curious, are you surprised at the price? Do you think that it's a lot to pay $1,600 for, even though he is one of the greatest lefties of all time? He's a fantastic Hall of Famer, World Series champion for the Brooklyn Dodgers, very esteemed in the baseball community. But make no mistake, Sandy, from what I know, is alive and well, knock on wood, with everything going on in the world. And $1,600 to me was a big purchase, especially for my PC, for my personal collection of someone that was living. What are your thoughts on that? Would you ever pay $1,600? And I know in the prospect game, it's a little bit different, because signed rookie cards and prospect cards of like the young guys, they go for a lot of money, like the Bowman first chrome, et cetera, numbered of 10 golds. But this is a little bit different. So I would love to hear your thoughts in the chat. With that, I'm going to bring on, someone who is not only someone who's very active in our Vintage Breaks community. And if you don't know Vintage Breaks, check out our website at vintagebreaks.com. But Jim has become more than that. He is a friend of mine. I was going to say he's a friend of ours, because really he's a friend of Sam's. He talks regularly with Sam. I think he talks fairly often with J5. And then I think many members of the Vintage Breaks community. He's a really easy guy to talk to, but you, of course, can all decide for yourself. Jim, I think you are there, and you look great. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you wonderfully.
Great. Now, what did you think about the Koufax? Because I haven't showed it off to anyone. Did you catch any of that?
I did. Not all of it, but I did. And I would like to have it.
Okay, so that got my answer that I was looking for in terms of did you think it was a fair deal or not? I mean, how cool is it after you do the research and I find out that this thing is, by the way, remember, this could have literally been something he signed the moment after he got home from his first win. right? Who knows? Anything's possible. And I'm not trying to say all that to make it more valuable, because I'm pretty sure this is going to be with Crosby when I leave the earth. But it's a piece of baseball history. And speaking of which, I'm going up to, like, this weekend, the mecca of baseball history. I'm driving up with Crosby to the Baseball Hall of Fame.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
And so it just seemed to be fitting to get this in.
Yep.
And it only happened after all the research. So I'm curious, one, what'd you think of the purchase? But I just got it. Like, you let the cat out of the bag that you want it.
Yep.
But number two, has it ever happened to you, either in our field, or, to be fair, and we're going to talk about you in a minute and your background, but in the music space, have you ever been to a convention or been to a home on a collection hunt, and you don't buy something right away, but you then do some research, you reach back out, and have either you had your heart broken, or, to be fair, was there an epic ending to the story, like in this case with the Koufax?
First, I don't think that you paid too much for that Koufax. Honestly, I would have thought it would have been more.
That's what my friend said as well. Yeah. That's what kind of gave me the impetus to drive me over the edge.
Yes.
I think, I don't want to misquote, but I think he said late, I thought you were to tell me it was $3,500.
That would have been a guess of mine too.
Yeah. And it was out at the show at 2,000. So remember, publicly, Jim, even though I bought it $1,600 privately, publicly, anyone could have bought this for $2,000. I mean, he walked up to the booth, no discount, and said, "I'll take this, sir, for $2,000 cash." Yep. It was priced at $2,000.
I can't think of a time where I walked away from something and then came back. I've had collections where I've, thought about it, contacted. So I guess I have, where I've contacted them back and they said, "Oh, sorry, we sold it to somebody else." I have it's too long of a story to tell now. I can tell you another time of the first record collection that I ever bought. And we had just started carrying vinyl again in here, and these kids came in selling for their grandfather, selling their grandma's collection. And I didn't know a lot about the vinyl world at that point. This is probably, 15 years ago, before we'd really gotten into it. And I bought some from them. I offered them a terribly low price, which I still feel bad about. I had no idea. And they said, "Well, the rest of it's at home. We'll go get it and come back." I'm not going to tell you what I paid for it because it's criminal, but I think I sold a good chunk of it, which isn't the same when you're looking at cards, but I think I sold a chunk of it for, I don't know, man, somewhere around 30 to 40 grand.
Wow.
It was all early UK stuff. We had a couple of guys from Russia that came to go through all of that stuff and buy. What happened, but they never came back with the other half of the records. And in hindsight, one, I would have paid them way more money, and two, I would have driven to their house with them to grab the rest of that stuff, so I didn't miss out on it. But that's kind of a different story. But anyways.
Well, I appreciate you sharing me, and that's an interesting angle, because I didn't consider that, but you're right. I've definitely followed up with collections that have sold it, but that to me, I figured is kind of like a regular thing. And I don't know for you if you're able to still do this, but I believe you are, because we talk enough. You're still a collector at heart as well.
Yeah.
There's a difference between when the business misses a deal and you miss an item for your PC. And what's crazy, Jim, is that you and I both know the deal is the one we should care more about, because it's how we eat.
Yes.
But yet
we don't.
But we don't.
No,
this is how we are.
No. It's, and actually, and the first card I have here that I bought at the National a couple of years ago, I was looking at it. The price was really good on it. And I said to the guy, "Let me walk around for a minute and I'll come back and buy it. Or I'll come back, and see you." And he said, "That's cool." He was an older guy. And he said, "That's cool. But I'm going to tell you right now that so often people say they're going to come back, and by the time they come back, the card is gone." So I actually stepped away for just 30 seconds. Then I said, "Okay, you're right. I'm just going to buy it now." So it almost could have happened to me, but thankfully I went ahead and grabbed it, so. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate your feedback on the Koufax and, kind of like your own, journey with that record collection. And speaking of which, Jim, before we go any further,
you are going to give me the Koufax, or that's off the table?
Jim, your Christmas gift is now, like, you're all set. Yeah, it was like either cookies or a Sandy Koufax rookie auto within 10 days of his first complete game shutout in the majors. Oh yeah, Jim.
It's tough.
It's really, I tell you though, I think I'm going to bring it this weekend in the Hall of Fame. I do.
You
Not
should.
to
Oh,
donate
that's
it.
cool. No, you should.
But
Definitely.
you know, to me, I recently, and you and I could BS for hours, so I'm going to try to keep it within an hour.
Yes.
For the audience's sake, at least.
Yes.
But you know, this is one of those pieces that I really feel like the love of collecting is alive in me, and it's nice, right? Because at the end of the day, if this just becomes a grind for you and I,
Yep.
it's not really as fun to make a living doing this. And when I saw, briefly, as I mentioned, I think on last week's episode, my son interacting with Sharon from Black Jade Wolf about the show One Piece, and how even though she had bought a card for $3,800, and even though Crosby knows that's a lot, he doesn't have any concept of actually what that means, you know, that amount of money. And it didn't matter because Crosby was noticing pieces of, I guess, art for what it signified or what it meant on this card. And I'm not even sure Sharon saw it. And so what I'm saying is the two of them looking together, it really, I wouldn't say it brought a tear to my eye, but like it brought some warmth to my heart.
Yeah.
To know, like, everyone, and look at your background, right? I mean, you know, it's obviously largely music, and we're going to talk about you and your background and what you do in a minute. But the love of collecting doesn't just have to mean card collecting. And so I wanted to share with everyone the Koufax journey for me today, because I want to let everyone know that even though I'm a professional treasure hunter for cards, I'm by no means an expert in other arenas. And to be clear, there's sometimes I find cards I'm not an expert in.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to say as such because it's fun to learn.
Yep.
But it is fun, the collecting journey, especially when you have that love of collecting with you. And so with that, Jim, I'd like to, I guess, segue to you and talk really about who you are, your background, but also if you could weave into that, where did your love of collecting first start?
Well, just to start there, I mean, my love of collecting started. I lived in Cincinnati as a kid, and that's at that age. I lived other places before that, but that's where I lived when I became a sports fan. And I remember, so this was '78, and when we would go to the grocery store, I had two brothers, and we would get a rack pack, and we would each get one, sleeve of the rack pack there, and all I cared about was getting Reds cards, at the time. So my brothers would take all the good stuff as long as I got.
So Jim, you had two brothers?
Two, yes. Yeah.
So to be clear, evenly split amongst the Ector boys, because if for those that don't know the rack packs he's talking about, there were 3 slots.
Yes.
So like if there were 51 cards, which commonly it was about what there were, there'd be 17 in each. There might be a bonus all-star card. By the way, if there was a bonus card, how did you decide what section that would, who would get that section?
It wouldn't be me. I can tell you that. There's 2 older brothers, so I didn't get first pick of anything. So yes.
That's cool though. I mean, listen, you're really giving us like a glimpse into the, American story as to what was going on in 1978. Because let's be clear, Jim, you're right. If you weren't the oldest,
no,
you weren't getting the extra card.
I get nothing. But that same year, for my birthday, I got a full wax box of 78 tops.
Ooh.
Which is pretty amazing, especially for a kid who's used to getting a pack every, once in a couple of weeks, whatever, to get a full box. I can still, in my mind, see that box right as I opened it.
And that smell, right? Like if it's a fresh box,
yes,
the gum is kind of like,
Oh yeah, the lines of the smell of the gum are coming off of it. Yeah, man, that's still one of the best gifts I've ever gotten in my life, for sure.
That's awesome, Jim. So tell me, in that moment, did you know already if you were going to rip it all open? You still have it closed? And in that moment, did you have a different, set of thoughts? Tell us.
No, there was no question. As at the time, I mean, I was 5. All I was doing was opening that, and I think that I opened it right then and there.
That's cool.
Birthday party or not, I didn't care if anybody was over. I'm opening those cards, and that's exactly what I did.
So as a kid, Jim, at that age, when you opened it, did you rip it open and did you begin sorting the cards like by number, by team? Did you let it be for a little bit?
Well, the biggest things that mattered, like I said before, were the Reds and then All-Stars. So, and it didn't matter if it was the, I don't know what I'm trying to think of, if it was the Rick Burleson All-Star or,
Like
one
a
of the
major
one of
guy.
the big names. Yeah, I didn't care. I just wanted the All Stars and the Reds. That was
Okay.
the big thing.
And that would have been like in a separate pile for you.
Oh yeah, for sure. But we also would play. If you remember on the back of 78s, they had the game. So we would play the baseball game with the cards too, where it had the fly out, single, home run, all that kind of stuff. So we would use that to play the game too.
Oh, I'm gonna have to relook at 78s because I mean I can picture the back of it. It's wonderful to hear about how cards have been all part of our lives, but in different ways.
For sure.
And I mean, I think as you know, and for those that have listened to the podcast before, I talk about my son Crosby a fair amount, and he's at a wonderful age right now. He's 9, he's going on 10. And I want to tell you something, if I could, Jim, just for a minute, because it was just wonderful to see over the last few days where his mind is going. It's, he's smart, and he's asking me now about submitting cards to PSA, not for gain. I think because he just thinks it's cool, right? He wants a card in a plastic case. So last night we took home a binder of pages from the office. I guess it's like a stack of those card saver ones you would submit to PSA, so 50 of them.
Yep.
And then a bunch of 9-pocket sheets, with the binder. And when we started going through it, he was trying to almost say like, hey, am I doing something wrong, or should we be doing something different because it's taking a while? And I kind of smirked, and a warmness came over me. I said, honey, do you know how much time Daddy spent as a kid just sorting? So keep in mind, there was no PSA. That's what I was trying to explain to him. There was no like eBay. Like I would take my card, and America Online groups did start when I was really young. And so I remember listing some of my cards there, and that was just the coolest, man. People are going online, and I'm like, Dad, I just sold the card for $12. He's like, no, you didn't. I'm like, well, you got to take it to the post office and mail it. So yeah, I did. You got to take care of it.
That's big time.
And yeah, $12 is a good sale for someone who's 13. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But anyway, it really dawned on him yesterday, like it's now an activity. In other words, we opened packs yesterday. We opened them together. He picked out, I'll be honest, I don't know all the One Piece characters, but I know some of them. I know he likes Sanji better than Zoro. Don't ask me why. I was trying to figure it out why. He was trying to explain to me.
Yeah.
And he was saying that because he likes Luffy, you got to like, and Luffy's one of the main characters of One Piece. But listen, I'm trying to show an interest of something that he's passionate about. Just because he doesn't love baseball like his daddy yet doesn't mean that I don't want to show interest. And so what I'm saying is collecting can be great in all forms. And it just was wonderful to see him sorting his collection last night the way that you and I have done, Jim, whether it be you in 1978, for me at some point in the 80s. And I want to bring it back to center because, as you know, I can talk away here, and I want to try to ask you some more stuff. So how did you progress? Like, where did your love of collecting progress as that little kid, the youngest of 3, who was lucky to get a third of the rack pack?
Yes. I kept getting cards for the next, I don't know, I think I was buying regularly until about 83. And then at that point, music became everything. And so I kind of switched away from those cards. I still kept them, but I switched away from cards and started buying cassettes, because that became all I cared about at that point,
Not business-wise, just because you love music.
Yes, because I was just a little kid. I just loved it,
Sure.
And then, then I would kind of go back into buying cards again, and then back out of cards, because then now I'm in high school, and now my focuses are changing a little bit away from cards into other things, other extracurricular activities, but never lost the love for both. In high school, I did a book report, or an oral report, I guess, of what you want to be when you grow up. And I went to the local record store and I interviewed Brian Ehrlich, was the owner of the Turntable. And I interviewed him because that's what I wanted to do when I grow up, was have my own record store. And, you know, fast forward however many years, that's what I got to do, which is, I'm very lucky for that, you know. But then I would get back into cards again, and, you know, and in and out. And I got really back into it, though, when one of our vendors here told me, who was into cards, told me about being at the National and some guy screaming about pulling a mantle up on the big stage. And that's truly, you know, that's
Oh
that's
my
how.
God.
And I was like, what? You know, so I got back, I went and watched it, and then I was like, I'm gonna go check out this site. And then I think I bought like one card, one spot in a 78 Tops, just to, you know, to relive the 78 Tops glory. And yeah, and then now that was what, 6 years ago or something. So yeah.
That's really cool. I want to kind of explain for those listening, Jim, and maybe not watching, a little bit more, because for those that are hearing me laugh but not seeing me, they might think this is a little odd. But, you know, Leighton, you're laughing at this funny story. The reason why I'm laughing so much, folks, is because the lunatic that Jim is talking about that was laughing with his eyes popping out at the Cleveland National is yours truly. So I think it was about 5-ish, 6 years ago at the Cleveland National. We were opening up a 1955 Bowman cello pack. It came from a very good friend of mine, Tony Arnold. And I'm not exaggerating, probably took 6 months or 8 months or 9 months to sell it out. Spots were $500 each. Jim, I'm sure at some point we were like doing mixers to try to move the spots.
Yeah.
But I do remember deciding, I'm like, at some point, we were just going to do it. We're going to open it at the National. And we opened it on the main stage, and shout out to my buddy Mikey Eisner, and of course J5, who's still here. And you know, you, Jim, along with I don't know how many countless others, but the video's been viewed tens of thousands of times on YouTube, as well as that particular pulling of that card. So a Mickey Mantle was pulled in spot 19, and then it ultimately got graded by PSA over the next 48 hours. When the grade was released, it got graded a PSA 9, which I think at the time was a pop 3. And so ESPN picked it up, my buddy Darren Ravel, the Washington Post. I mean, my phone was ringing off the hook. I felt like I was in a band, you know, like I was going on tour. And it was very surreal. But nonetheless, Jim, it did attract people like yourself to our company. And our business really did change. Our lives changed overnight, because not only did our sales increase, you know, 5, 10, 15-fold, whatever the number was, you know, in that given day, like, meaning it was our best day of sales following that. But also folks like yourself almost got reintroduced to collecting because of this lunatic, yours truly, who really at the time, it's not that I didn't believe we could pull something great, but man, when you talk about just like poetic justice and anything could happen, I mean, the card was pulled second to last one. And I remember, I don't know if you can recall, Mikey had a great line. He had a flair for the dramatic, and he kind of peaked and he knew it was great. And I thought maybe it was like an Ernie Banks second year, which we hit earlier in the pack, but I saw other doubles, so I didn't know. And he said, we're something to the effect of, we're about to make history.
Yeah.
And I didn't know at that time exactly, of course, what that meant.
Get out your phones.
Yep.
You have your phones. I've watched it a couple of times.
Yeah.
Hit record. And then
so
starts.
Well, I'm glad that we did have that happen, Jim, because of course our paths may have not crossed.
Yeah.
And you know, at this point, you know, beyond becoming a valuable member of the Vintage Breaks community, I mean, you and I have done a fair amount of, you know, deals, meaning trades, cash trades. You bought cards from me.
Yep.
But before we kind of get into that, there's one question I wanted to ask, because I have a list and I don't always ask all the questions I prepare for my guests.
Okay.
But in this particular case, I love music myself, and I'm curious, has your journey, your experience in the music space as an owner, and I would imagine also a lover of music, an aficionado, and probably a collector as well, has it taught you anything about card collecting that's helped you? And if so, what can you share with the audience that they can also take from your journey that would be helpful to them?
Wow. That's a really good question. I'm not even sure
Thank you.
How to answer that. I don't know. Because from a collecting standpoint of both of them, I'm just very, once I get locked in on something, I'm going to do everything I can to try to be able to get it. But I don't know how to tie those both in together. I'm going to have to think about that one and get back to you. That's a really good question.
Okay, well, I don't want to force feed any answers.
Yeah.
But what I would say is, for example, maybe have you seen like a trend or something happen in music that's helped you either save money or, for that matter, take advantage of an opportunity and buy something at an earlier time than you normally would have, because something that you saw in music, whether it be memorabilia or, for that matter, the music itself.
Yeah. Well, I wish I would have started buying vinyl a lot sooner. That's for sure, because it's crazy what has happened in that world. And there's guys that that never stopped. A lot of people back in the 80s when CDs were coming out, everybody got rid of their records. There were a lot of people that obviously kept them, but a lot of people were donating them, throwing them away, whatever. There were certain guys that kept on buying, to where they could go to Goodwill, garage sales, and get everything they want and pay next to nothing for it. And some of these guys just amassed massive collections of records for pennies. And now those records are, again, it's weird when you compare records to cards, because the dollar figures are so much different.
It's different. But did those folks do it, even though they might have been dealers? Did they do it out of the love for it and they just thought it was cheap?
I think they did it out of love, and that's how they wanted to consume their music was on vinyl. And this is how I like to listen to it, and I'm not going to stop just because CDs are popular or cassettes or whatever. This is how I want to listen to music. I'm sure some of them have made plenty of money since then, but there's a lot of these guys that still come in here all the time that are the guys that they never stopped throughout the 80s, 90s, 2000s. They and they still buy records. I think what they hate is how popular it is now. So they can't buy all their stuff for nothing or walk into.
But that's a true collector, though.
Yeah.
So, Jim, if I may, because remember, I feel a little bit like I gave you a left hook, because on a lot of podcasts, candidly, a lot of the guests are force fed, but like given the questions beforehand.
Yeah.
And I just feel like it makes the content and the show inauthentic.
Sure.
And so, if it's something super controversial, then maybe,
yeah.
You talk about it before. Hey, can I talk about your dead cat? Whatever the case is. Sorry, I don't want to make fun of people who've lost their cat recently.
No.
You get my point. So if I may, I'm going to try to draw a conclusion for both of us of something I think that you might have seen and you maybe didn't realize you did learn, but you did. And I'm going to tell you what I think, because it's worked for me. I'm going to tell you the conclusion that I just made in my own brain as you share with me the story.
Lay it on me.
Okay. So here's the deal. We're going to use the records as the analogy, but this is the reality of it. Okay. Like when Jim's dad, who I believe is a Tigers fan,
big time,
and my dad, who's not a Tigers fan, he's a Yankee fan.
Of course. Okay.
But nonetheless, like when our dads were buying these cards, no one cared about value. In fact, I've been on video with a number of collectors where I bought their collections. They've even said, if you had 3 Bobby Mercers and I had 3 Mickey Mantles, it wasn't a big deal. Here's a Mickey Mantle, here's a Bobby Mercer. How you doing? No big deal. True. And you say, well, Leighton, what does this have to do with records? This is my point. At a time when records were thought to be being defunct, forget about being bought and sold. Like it was literally an archaic way of listening to music. It was no longer utilitarian, if you will. Okay.
Yep.
But yet there's still people who walk that straight and narrow of, I love records. I'm going to forget about buying and selling them. More of like, I'm going to keep buying and acquiring them because I love my record collection and this is how I want to enjoy music. So follow my logic. If there was someone like our fathers, and we're not blaming our dads here, even though a little bit like, come on, Dad, what are you doing? What are you doing? Can you imagine? Because there's not a single person who I talked to who didn't love their card collection. But do you know how few of them kept buying cards from the 1950s on? Almost no one.
Yeah, that's true.
And yet if they did, their collections are unbelievable.
Oh,
this is the lesson I want to take from this to share with everyone. I started collecting tickets, specifically Michael Jordan ticket stubs, before they were popular. because literally Michael Jordan cards were expensive. His autographs were expensive. His photos are now starting to get expensive. And of course, his ticket stubs are now expensive. But there was a time, Jim, where I'm making it up. I would buy in the mail from eBay like 3 rookie year stubs for like $42. And I did it not because it was an investment.
No.
Because I enjoyed collecting Michael Jordan stuff.
Yep.
And I didn't have an unlimited budget. And I still don't. Maybe my budgets change. But this is my point for folks who are listening to this and be like, what are you saying, Leighton? Connect it all together. My point is this. If you believe in a space, you're collecting something, and interests are changing all around you, don't listen to the noise. Don't worry about following the masses. Become your own person. Think for yourself. And who knows? You might just be that person who bought records through the last 10 or 20 years, and you bought them for pennies on the dollar. Who knows? You could have been someone who bought 50s cards in the 60s and 70s when literally there was no difference between Mickey Mantle and Bobby Mercer as far as price went. It started to happen in the late 70s and the 80s, of course. So that's what I'm trying to say. So in other words, I got a buddy. He buys music posters from different events, concerts, meaning not just for the band, but like if it's a big festival, he likes to buy them. And he kind of gets it now. He's keeping it in good shape. Not because he necessarily thinks they're going to be good money, because he's made his entire basement all about it. And now he's adding different posters to it. And of course, he does hope it's more reasonably priced. The same way the record buyers and like the folks from Net 54, which is, by the way, a great, fantastic vintage card community. You can find them at net54baseball.com. But there's folks on there, Jim, and some people describe them as a little bit crusty because they remember buying T206s for literally $1 or $2 from the Trader Speaks or something like that. And I get it. To me, all of the stories and the history is what I love about all of this. And I'm just curious if you see that same connection. In other words, whatever it is right now in cards or music for you that's cheap or cheaper, don't let someone talk you out of it because it's not in vogue or it's not hot. If you like it, if you enjoy it, I say keep going. What are your thoughts?
That I couldn't agree more with you. And because if all you're doing it for is the money, then where's the fun in that? And I don't know. It's still even when it comes to records, it's still my favorite part about it is just seeing them, looking at them, holding them, reading them, selling them is cool too, but it's all the other stuff that is what really matters the most.
Jim, in a nutshell, I can tell you that's why we're friends, because you just said exactly the way I feel about cards. And J5 has recently kind of joined that camp. We both realize we don't have enough money to buy all the cards that I'm trading here on behalf of Just Collect. But man, it's really cool. Instead of having TPS reports, shout out to the Wooly office space. Instead of having TPS reports on my desk stacked to wazoo, I've got the likes of Ruth and Gehrig and T206 collections by the hundreds. And all of that, it brings a certain warmness to my heart.
Yep.
I enjoy it thoroughly. And even if I'm just the custodian for a little bit of time, I would much rather have to do that than something I'm not passionate about.
Absolutely. Plus, I get to wear a Judas Priest shirt to work. I don't have to.
Hey, I'm wearing my my Karma Records sweatshirt today.
I thought you looked extra sharp. I couldn't tell what it said right there, but you were looking classy.
Hey, Jim, come on now. I know how to butter everybody up.
No, and also, whoops, I get to get stuff like this, which is not actually signed, but this is. Have you ever heard this song? I don't know that I would recommend listening to it, but this is the song that the Charlie Hustle. Well,
I've heard of Do the Hustle, that song.
There's your other side. But yeah, that's the Pete Rose Charlie Hustle. Rest in peace, Pete. And I'll show you one other. This one got the other day, which is one of the coolest.
Oh, the Butcher cover?
Yep.
Is that for your PC?
Yes. And I tried, and this is what I was going to say. I try really hard to not keep stuff for myself. I have a lot.
I don't try that hard, Jim. It's bad.
I know. It is tough. But this one came in, and so this is,
I know what it is, but you tell everyone what it is. I know what it is.
So,
please tell everyone.
This came out, I think it was 66. And obviously, if you think of the Beatles at that time, people did not want to see the Beatles with a bunch of meat and doll parts all over them. So it went out to stores, and the stores immediately, everybody was super upset. So they had to send them all back, other than a few that got purchased, but they all had to go back to Capitol Records. So Capitol Records then took a new cover and they just stuck it over the top of it. So, and then they shipped those back out again. And then after that first press run was done, then it was just, they just were the new cover, So now anytime you see the new cover, which I wish I had one right here, I'd show you, but the way you can tell you have a Butcher cover is you can see, whoops, wrong way, Ringo's turtleneck through the new cover. First state is the ones where that is the actual cover. Second state is with the new cover. This is third state, and you can see, it's got a few tears where somebody pulled, like over here, the glue, they peeled the cover off, which I don't know. I had a second state with the cover on it, but having it like this, even though it's got a few tears on it,
I'd rather have it
way cooler.
So I was actually going to ask the community, let us know in the chat, because I understand the Butcher cover, and I'm not a record expert by any means, but I'm familiar with that record. So basically, Jim, I'm curious what you prefer, and then I want to ask the community, let us know in the chat. If I was someone who was buying that record, I mean, I would love to have it in its original state, meaning no sticker on top, perfect condition. But if you said to me, would I rather have it on top and knowing that it's mint, or having it removed with a little bit of damage, I think the whole reason that the Butcher cover is interesting is because of the first state.
Absolutely.
So I think I'm similar to you, that even though it's not mint, I wouldn't want, even if I had the Butcher cover with that, if you will, it's not a placard, just piece of paper / whatever the cover was on top. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't want that. I would want to have the original cover, even if it wasn't mint.
Yeah.
Now, you said you were going to keep it for yourself?
This one I am. Yeah, I had a second state, and so that's my feelings on it. It was neat to have, but once this rolled in, I sold the second state, because, I mean, really the only difference between that and the regular cover is the little black triangle of Ringo's turtleneck. Having this is, I mean, it's pretty awesome.
Now, Jimmy, if we may ask, what does something like that cost these days?
So I just sold a second state. We got one actually in a collection too, another second state in a collection, which is about $1,000, and I think this would go for a little bit more than that. First states are super hard to find. I think a lot of them, they got covered, so they disappeared. A lot of them, I think, went to like the head of Capitol Records. And then he did kind of whatever, I'm sure copies got snuck out here and there, but there's some floating around, but I can't imagine what those would cost now.
Oh, so, probably thousands, right?
Yeah. But that one I'm keeping for sure.
All right, let's switch gears here for a minute. And I know you've been to at least one national, if not a couple.
Yep.
And I was curious if you could say to anyone that collects cards, but who's not been to the National, what do you love about the National Sports Collectors Convention, and why do you think it's a must-attend event for someone who collects cards?
It's really overload. I mean, it's true sensory overload, and it's kind of your head's on a swivel as you look, and I don't know. It's the greatest. I mean, it's the if you're a collector, it's the best way to spend a few days, because you can see everything. Cars you would never even have thought existed or knew existed or whatever. You'll see them, right in front of you. It's the best. I mean, it's a long few days, as you know that very well. But it seems like almost like there's never enough time. Even when I've walked through the whole thing and I feel like I've seen everything, I know I could walk through the whole thing again and would see stuff that I did not see the first time. It's the best, honestly.
I agree. I think that from a passive, just as a fan of sports, meaning a non-collector, it's the Hall of Fame on wheels.
Yep.
Because remember, the Baseball Hall of Fame where I'm going to this weekend with my son, it'll be there next weekend. It'll be there the weekend after.
Yes.
That's, I think, what makes the National Sports Collectors Convention so special is that, and I say it every year, it's the longest, quickest week every year of my life.
Yeah.
Because it is. It's a ton of work. There's an incredible amount of hours. Myself and our team works really, really hard on behalf of both companies, just collecting vintage breaks. And yet it is so much fun. There's so much action. And then just as a collector, even if you just go there only as a collector, it's sensory overload. So when you combine that for me, I mean, it's like the World Series of sports cards, but it's greater than that. Because obviously the World Series is a game that's played, and this is something that you go and you look at everything.
Yeah.
And so, as you said very well, you could spend every waking minute of the days that the convention's open, and you still would not be able to see everything. It's impossible.
No way. And it's better than the Hall of Fame because you can actually buy the stuff that's on the other side of that glass case.
Well, I just want to be clear here, Jim. I'm not necessarily disagreeing, but that is a wonderful piece of content you may have just created for us.
Yeah.
Controversial for sure. What is better, the Baseball Hall of Fame or the National Sports Collectors Convention? And according to Jim, because you can buy and sell. I've long thought this as well.
I'm not saying it's better.
I'm not. I'm just having some fun with it.
That's tough.
I agree with you. Yeah. Because to me, and I went up to the Baseball Hall of Fame. We could look it up. My first time was when Jim Palmer and Joe Morgan got inducted. So I don't, know the exact year, but I was there that weekend, and I'm sure it was just by accident. I mean, my father brought us up there with our family, and at that time, Larry Fritsch of Fritsch Cards had a little museum in town. And you could bet your bottom dollar. I mean, I did go, but I took, my parents did not want to go there. So like, we're already taking you to the Hall of Fame and all this stuff. I'm like, this is gonna be better than the Hall of Fame. And so that's kind of where the impetus behind my rationale was coming from. I would say this, I do love the Hall of Fame. And my very good friend Todd he's going up with his son, Ryan, and my son and I, Crosby, are joining him. And I'm a friend of theirs for like a little early tour before it opens. And this is the point. I think it's going to be unbelievable. But no matter how much I love it or fall in love with a certain piece, unless it's in the gift shop, I can't buy it.
Can't have it.
And as someone who's a collector and fancies himself a professional sports card treasure hunter, there's a little bit of me. I don't think you're necessarily wrong about the National could be better. It's just different.
Yes.
But they're both amazing.
Yeah.
And with that, with a little bit of time left, I wanted to try to cover, it's going to be talking a little bit about your journey with one of the most epic baseball card sets ever made. And so for those out there, I'm going to pause for a minute. Let me know in the chat or ponder, what do you think are the 3 most desirable baseball card sets ever made? We're not talking about value or anything like that. And usually what comes to mind are these 3. The T206 set, the 1933 Gowdy set, and the 1952 Top set. And I'm going to pause for another second. But Jim recently finished one of those sets. So take a moment to think about which one it was. And as you do, Jim, we can now reveal to everyone which set it is. Tell us about how you got your start on this epic and iconic baseball card set.
I had gotten several Gowdies just collecting them, looking for guys like Dizzy Dean and Jimmy Fox and some of those guys. And then I think it was 4 years ago at a national, I went with the intentions of getting a Babe Ruth.
I think I remember that.
Yes, yeah, and we did actually, and so that was my first one.
Okay, the red number 149.
Yep. And for a 1, it's really nice. And I was just wanted the eye appeal. I didn't want to spend as much money. It just has some paper loss on the back, which sure. I don't know if you can see that, but so I had that. That was cool. And then I was talking to Paul Kangas, Breakamaniac, and he told me that he had, this is, probably 3 years ago or 2 years ago, that he had completed the Gaudi set. I'm like, the thought of that had never crossed my mind of doing something like that, and it still kind of didn't, but I was really impressed, and I was, kind of jealous, which you're not supposed to be, but I was. And I already had some other commons, I guess, of Gaudis from doing on vintage brakes. I think it was maybe 4 years ago was one of the last big Gaudi. That there was a 33 and a 34 that broke at the same time. So I already had some. And then at the National 2 years ago in Chicago, you and I did a great deal for this beautiful, I cannot get the glare off. Sorry.
Try to tilt it.
This,
forward. That's tough. There we go. A little better.
It's beautiful. Beautiful card. You and I did the deal for it. And I was just super excited to have a Lou Gehrig finally to go with my Babe Ruth. And then 2 days later, I think it was 2 days, the next Gaudi break on BB happened. And I got extremely lucky because I hit this first.
Gosh, so man, for those that are listening to this, and when Jim says VB, he means VintageBrakes.com. And he's showing off the number 144 Babe Ruth in his full pose in an SGC 2.5. And when he's saying got lucky, we run set breaks on VintageBrakes.com, and you can buy a spot in these respective set breaks. So, for example, if you went to our website right now, we probably have over 20 or about 20 or so breaks. And as Jim said, 1933 Gaudi is not a break we get regularly.
No. I mean, it's exciting when it happens, and it's even more exciting when it opens, because then I hit right after that. I hit the 160 Gehrig in a 4, and it's beautiful. So now in just a couple of days, I've gotten both Gehrigs, and now I have 2 Ruths. And all of a sudden, I'm remembering Paul Kangas completing his set, and I'm like, oh, maybe I could do this. And so that just became my focus for the next 6 months. And you were a humongous help to me, because for a while there you had gotten in some really nice Gaudi collections, and we did a trade for a good stack, I think, of
I remember
elements, yeah.
Which I think I'm still owed some music credit for some equipment.
I don't remember that. I don't know anything about that. And then I was just, I just keep the checklist going, and every day I would just kind of whittle, one down, and my main focus was to 2 or higher. No creases was my main thing, is I just don't want any creases on the cards. Then you and I did this trade. Just shows how big of a part you were in
number 181. I remember that card. That came from the Arizona collection, which, by the way, if folks want to read the story behind that big Gaudi find in Arizona with over 800 Gaudis, you can check out my blog at blog.justcollect.com.
Yeah. And, people have differing opinions on which Ruth is their favorite. And this, I don't think usually this is the one, but the color on this one and just the card itself, this is my favorite of the Ruths. So
that one in particular, I understand why, because I remember you were asking me when I was providing you images, like, hey, what's wrong with it? I'm like, it really is just wear. But the card, now remember, grading standards have evolved and changed over the last 20, 30 years. So back in the day, Jim, prior to professional grading companies, that card would have been in a screw case at someone's table, and they would have called that VGX, meaning a 4, and no one would have hesitated. So grading's become a little bit more technical, in some cases a little bit more strict. But I agree with you that card has a lot of great eye appeal.
It's beautiful. I mean, like you said, a little bit of the rounding on the corners, on a couple of them, but just beautiful card. So I got the whole set done except for 53. and I was kind of at a stuck point of I'm not going to be able to. I can't justify right now spending the money on, because I wanted to get a nicer one if I could, but I just couldn't justify it. And then I was Jeremy Service, also from Vintage, who's a customer on Vintage Breaks. We've done trades before, and he asked if I was looking for anything. I told him that. He sent me a couple of pictures, and I recognized the sticker, and from that he had seen online of another dealer who just happened to be Ash. So I just, out of the blue, I bought from Ash before at card shows and sold him stuff. And I'm just going to send him a message and see if will he do a trade? And man, he was cool enough that we did a straight trade. And next thing you know, I finally completed it with the 2.5. I wish I could get the glare off.
That's okay. Well, we're going to try to get good images so we can make it part of the video. But congratulations on the number 53 Babe Ruth. Shout out to Ash, who did a trade with you. And really, what I want to point out to people who are either just entering the space, collecting vintage cards, or maybe you've been there for a while and you don't know Jim, you don't know myself or others from the Vintage Breaks community or the Just Collect community. And I want to point out that, yes, you did hear from someone else completing the set that kind of gave you the impetus or the reasoning to like, hey, this is possible. I could do this. But, sometimes, whether it be in sports cards or politics, for example, which we're not going to get into, but, people, they often say something, but they don't talk the talk. And so what I want to do is give some credit to Ash, and I'm not going to be taking credit myself here, but I want to more give credit to dealers at large. Most dealers, Jim, I think you found this. If you're honest with them, if you're transparent, we can't always listen. You and I were collaborating about a deal over the last few days. We might trade one card and not another. And I felt like so bad about one. I called you because I just want to make sure we're on the same page. Thanks for laughing, but it was the truth. Yeah. But anyway, the point is the community really can be a wonderful escape from your day job, from the daily stresses of kids or other, in your life. But if you don't speak up, if you don't ask someone, like, in other words, Ash wasn't reaching out to you and saying, by the way, Jim, I've got this number 53 Babe Ruth to trade you. What do you think? So I know you've got a couple of years of my son Crosby, but I've talked about this a few episodes ago. The hobby can teach us so much about life. And let's be honest, right? Life's in a precarious spot right now in the world. There's just all sorts of stuff going on. The election's coming up. And what I want to do is bring this back to center. And as collectors, we can all look out for each other. And it's okay. Like, in other words, if I need cash for a card, I'm not shy to say to Jim, hey, I can't trade this card. I need to sell it, i.e. I need cash. I need wampum. I need something I can go to the grocery store and buy meat with, or, whatever the case is. Yeah. I thought you might catch that. But it's a good one. But anyway, kind of getting back to center, I want to give a shout out to Ash and other dealers that are working hard, that are setting up these conventions. My friend Tony, like, we're not always going to be able to work out a trade with you, but if you are reasonable and you explain to us your intentions, I mean, look, you never thought, yes, you had a little bit of luck, but it took a lot of your own hard work, whether it be money or, let's be honest, right? When you put yourself out, and I don't think I'm going to embarrass you, but for a moment, I'm going to point out that the way Jim made the trade seem with Ash was smooth as butter, and the trade might have been. But Ash had his own life, and it took a couple days for him to get back to Jim. And let's just say, I'm not going to reveal Jim's text on here. Jim was a little nervous. And so I appreciate you kind of laughing at it, meaning at the end of the day, it didn't mean that Ash was going to do it or not. But I just said, hey, have some patience, because maybe he's just busy. And lo and behold, he did. And really, it just had such a happy, wonderful ending, because you were able to complete a set probably a couple of years ago that you never thought you did. Yeah. That never thought you would. And what I wanted to ask you as we're finishing up the episode, what do you think is one or two of, let's say, your biggest takeaways from this journey of completing this set, right? Because it's not financial. In other words, I don't think you don't strike me as the kind of person who's looking up each card and saying, this is what my set is worth. Your wife might ask that. I have no doubt about that. Probably. But I don't think that you are. So what is something that you can share with the audience that you learned or you enjoyed along the way that you might recommend someone else to experience on their own their own set journey, or to be fair, collecting one of each card of Rocky Colavito, for example, or whatever the
Yeah.
case is.
I think it's the chase that's so fun. It's the work that you put into it, and it's even more fun when it's work you put into something that you really love. And how I view these cards as just little cardboard pieces of art. I just I love the cards also to even just look at, I know you sometimes would go through your cards just to kind of pull them out and look at them. I mean, they're just and then that sense of accomplishment at the end was really it's just the whole thing was just it was never work. It was always fun doing it. I looked forward each day when I would get the email, the eBay email that says these cards on your your search list have just become available, and the excitement each time you click to see what's it going to be this time. Will I finally have gotten that card that I can now check off the list? I don't know. It was just every day. It was exciting to see what was coming around the corner.
I think that's the epitome, Jim, of what I've been trying to preach to my son recently, of how, like, for example, this weekend, once we get to the Hall of Fame or we get to the hotel, is that going to be exciting? Absolutely. But it's not to tune out the world on the way. And I don't mean literally meaning with like an iPad. I just mean, let's sing some songs. Let's be silly. Let's stop for some food in a random place, not a fast food restaurant. Meaning really live life. And I don't want to get too sentimental here and philosophical at the end of what is now an hour plus episode of Trading Card Therapy. Man, I got to try to do these faster, Jim.
Sorry.
No, you don't have to be sorry for anything. In fact, the team told me when I went about this talk about goals. So in other words, I told them I'm going to do 25 guests over the next 25 weeks. And then they thought it was great. They're like, so how long the episodes are going to be? I'm like, I don't know, 30 minutes, 45 minutes. J5 looked at me like with this scowl. He's like, there's no effing way.
I could see that look in my head too.
Yeah, he's like, there's just no way on God's green earth that's going to happen.
Yeah.
And so kind of talking about goals and things of that nature, I'm sharing the knowledge with my son, but even when I'm doing the Trading Card Therapy, I'm not doing this and having 25 guests because at the end I get some sort of YouTube plaque, because my son is very obsessed with me getting some sort of YouTube plaque, believe me.
Sure.
But nonetheless, I enjoy each and every week, not just the interview, but I actually enjoy beforehand the discussion with that particular guest, and then afterwards recapping, like, oh my God, late, you didn't tell me I didn't cut my nose hairs. I'm not responsible. I mean, we have a green room, but I don't have a beautician on staff.
No, not yet.
Not yet, at least.
Yeah.
But all the joking aside, Jim, I sincerely appreciate you joining me today and the time that we've got to know each other over the last several years. But I would be remiss, because you've spent an incredible amount of time with the Vintage Breaks community. I wanted to ask you, in your opinion, what are one or two of the things that you really enjoy about the Vintage Breaks community? And by the way, if you want to join this community, you can go to the website, of course, and spend money. But what I'm really referring to is our YouTube community. You can find us at youtube.com/Vintage Breaks. We stream 7 days a week. And we actually have lots of folks who participate and watch our streams that they never buy anything. So I was curious for the audience that maybe has never experienced a Vintage Breaks stream, or they don't know anything about our community. What are one or two of the things that you really have enjoyed over time?
Well, I mean, other than the obvious of the cards and just seeing the cards, and like you said, there's a lot of people that are on there that aren't there to buy or anything, but it's fun to watch packs being opened. It's fun to see big things come out of these packs, but it's also the community involved in it, and the generosity and the kindness of the people that are there in the chat, and the friendships, I think, of each day. These people are seeing when they go onto the chat, are saying hi to each other, and it's like seeing, I guess, saying hello to a friend each day, that you get to see and talk to. And it's just a great way to spend a few hours for me, when I can hour or two, whatever, at night, just to unwind and just to watch together what we love. I don't know. It's good stuff.
Well, Jim, it's people like you that have made the community is what it is today. But I would say even more importantly, you and I talk much more, about cards these days, life, music, traveling, etc.
Yep.
And, at the end of the day, at least as far as I know, even if when you leave the earth, you'd like to maybe put a couple of the cards in your casket, most of us aren't going to leave with many of them in that place. And so more than ever before, right, it's about the journey. And so whether it be the journey of completing your 1933 Gaudi set, whether it be the journey of driving the 4 or 5 hours from Northeast New Jersey to Cooperstown, New York, and making sure you're enjoying all of that, or your collecting journey in general of trying to find something in a space. Let's be honest, right? I'm sure in music, records have become more expensive than what they used to be. Cards, a lot of people complain about modern wax prices, which candidly is how set breaks were actually born at vintage breaks. I mean, it's kind of wild. But we talked about a lot of different things today on the show, Jim. I'm going to put you on the spot just one last time. If there's something that you could vote for or wish into existence in the hobby, what's one thing you'd like to see change or happen?
Again, that's a tough one. If I was a modern guy, I would be wishing for cards to be cheaper. I can say one thing that I really hope is that vintage, and this might make no sense, but that vintage stays a thing, and that as time goes by and some of these older stars become less and less relevant, less and less talked about, that people still know who those players are and still know that history of baseball, and that these guys don't just kind of fade out. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? And I hope that cards, that's kind of why sometimes I like when they put the vintage players in the modern sets, so that younger kids can see these guys from back then who they might not have known who, I don't know, Tris Speaker was or something like that,
Jim, perfect spot to end on, because there's thoughts either way in the hobby about when Prism comes out with a set of modern football cards or basketball and they have greats in them. I know that for the few sports packs my son will tolerate opening, I love if we get a Jackie Robinson Turn Back the Clock card, because we read a book about him together.
Yep. And
as much as I love Donnie Baseball or Mike Trout, my son and I haven't read any books on them together.
Right.
So I do agree with you. I think we could have a whole other episode on some of our thoughts and feelings about the Brooks Robinsons of the world, meaning like the Hall of Famers are really good ones, but maybe they're not upper tier. What's going to happen to their cards? Stay tuned. Maybe we'll have Jim back in the future. Yeah. Jim, thank you so much for spending a ton of time with me today on Trading Card Therapy, and to be fair, even more time over the last several years.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, and I appreciate you having me on here. And I wanted to one more time I've thanked you before, but I wanted to thank you one more time for all the help, help that I've gotten from other people in the community, but all the help that you gave me on completing the set. And stuff that when you were looking for things and keeping an eye out for things for me that you didn't have to put your time into. And I just wanted you to know how much I really, truly appreciate everything you did to help me accomplish this goal. It means a lot to me.
Listen, it was my pleasure, Jim. I had a lot of fun, and I'm sure we'll have you back in the future. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, man. Later.
All right, so that is Jim Ector of Karma Records. I don't even know if he plugged his store, but we are going to do a super fun giveaway, which I should have announced during the show. So if anyone enjoyed the show today and you want to say hi and leave a comment, we're going to give away a $100 credit to Karma Records. I will confer and get with Jim to make sure that we get whoever wins that, the $100 spending spree. But I love music myself. I recently started my son in guitar lessons. I think it's a really important part of our culture and our history. The way to enter is to make a comment, say hi, and if you don't want to talk about cards at all, and specifically if you want to mention something about music, I would love to know who was your favorite musician or band of all time. That will get you an entry, and we will run the random. Remember, I will not have Trading Card Therapy next week, as I'll be out of town on my Arizona buy trip. But the week after, we will give away a $100 credit to Karma Records so you can get some more music for your collection. Thanks, everybody.